So, Joe, this episode actually kind of piggybacks after our statement episode that dropped last week of our life first movement, the whole life first, then business. I just said movement. I don't want to repeat myself, but that's the lens that we're looking at everything moving forward because after nearly 300 episodes, that's a common thing we see with solopreneurs is that they want to run a business that supports their life, not one that controls their life. So, in today's episode, I kind of want to break down like what we've seen and like I don't know, the one constant that we've seen. So you're so good at explaining this. Before we get to the villain and all of that, what is kind of um the cause, like what have we seen that's been happening that has made us want to move in this direction?
Well, I mean, I think at some level we kind of always knew it was about this kind of thing. Why are you a solopreneur? Why start a solo business and not have employees? Well, there's got to be a reason for that. And, it seemed that the reason for a lot of people was they just wanted control, right? They wanted to be able to kind of say how things were going to be. And, having employees is a great way to scale, but it isn't necessarily a great way to have complete control because you've just got a lot of responsibility. So, I think we've kind of distilled this down to this idea of the life first business. And the problem I think that we're seeing a lot, and I'm not saying everybody, but a good chunk of people that we talk to, that we get to know, are building a business that trades the kind of corporate trap of being stuck doing what you're told to do with another trap that they build themselves, right? Because they build a business based on what they're good at, their skills, and they start there and they end up building a business, but the whole life aspect is kind of left as the afterthought, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, they didn't want to be. It's funny because they take what they know and they're realizing that, or what we've realized for people is that a lot of times when people are stuck in a rut, it's not a motivation problem. It's a design problem because they're taking those corporate ideas and trying to bring it into their own life. And then they get really down on themselves when things aren't working, but really it's all in the design. It's not that they're unmotivated, right? And they can blame themselves so easily. And so that's why we wanted to name the villain, name what the causes are that's allowing people to feel this way, and then as Lifestar come up with a solution. So can you name that villain for us? What have we seen as a problem?
Well, we've named it the ownership. We've named it the ownership trap. But the idea here is it's it shouldn't be the kind of thing where people go, oh, I was stupid. I fell into the ownership trap. The ownership trap is kind of a natural result of starting in a very rational manner, which is I'm starting a business, I'm good at X or Y, and therefore I'm going to think about how to build a business using my skill, X or Y, to generate revenue as quickly as possible because that's what a business is all about, is generating revenue and making a profit. So it's not lazy thinking, it's not unrigorous thinking, but it misses a first step, which is the idea that you're doing this for your life. So maybe the first design parameter should revolve around the life you want and not the business. Before you start designing the business, you want to be thinking about how you want to design the life, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think I've told you this before. When I first went out on my own, I was saying yes to everything because it was a money thing. And I was like, well, oh my gosh, I knew it. I could make more as a solopreneur than I ever could in the agency world. And then I wasn't seeing my husband and I wasn't walking my dog. And I was like, no, 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 this isn't. I mean, even when I was still working in agency life, I was working insane hours. And I was like, and that's why I left agency life because these hours were just outrageous. And then I brought those outrageous hours with me into one person businesshood. And it was like, what am I doing? There was no plan. And I want people to avoid that if they can from the get-go. The paychecks are obviously enticing and sometimes and often necessary, but you don't want to get in the trap of just going after those. You need to really have that full picture of what you want.
Absolutely. And I mean, I did it too. Not as I built a solopreneur business I did a great job of designing it around my life way back when. And um, but then I did such a good job, I actually didn't have enough hours to work. And being who I am, I had to find a way to work more hours. So I started another business called Retail Analytics, and it was it was great. And then all of a sudden, it wasn't. And we got a $130,000 a year customer for our software, and then never got another one because the internet came along, and everybody wasn't sure if they were going to be stores because this was about stores. And I ended up pivoting to a service business, and I didn't think through what that was going to mean for my life. And it was horrible. We ended up having to do surveys at night. So we were working days. We had surveys going on at night. I was playing weekends to catch up because it was just so crazy and so much work, and, wasn't really making any money. And it was just this terrible decision that I, made de facto because it was the quickest way to get revenue, and didn't think about what I wanted my life to look like. So, I really screwed it up because I had a great life first business built, and then built another one that wasn't.
I know grass is always greener,
But
right? Well, so this is all that. So that's like the number one cause or the first cause of the ownership trap. We say no design, but you kind of just alluded to the second cause in your last story, which is no system. Can you elaborate from there?
sure, I mean, we when we work at companies, sometimes there aren't, but sometimes there are systems in place for keeping track of things, communication, processes, and those kinds of things. And a lot of times when solopreneurs get up and running, um, they don't bring those things with them because they can't, because the tools aren't made for solopreneurs. Things like standard operating procedures seem like something they do for a big company. And you wind up managing things through kind of communications through email or Slack or whatever communications channel, and all the commitments being made are done there, and the tracking is done there. And maybe you have a paper system, maybe you have some online system that you're using, but it doesn't talk to anybody else. Um, and to keep track of the actual to-dos and projects and things. And it's winds up becoming, um, at least for me, the way it worked for me was I would wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning going, oh, I forgot that. And, now I'm lying in bed going, I got to remember this. And, if I don't get up and write it down and put a post-it note on my computer, I'm not going to sleep again. And it was awful. And running a business that way can get very stressful. Things get dropped and missed. And I just didn't find it to be fun at all. So having a system in place to actually manage all the stuff going on, all the moving parts, is really critical to having a life first business.
And I do just want to reiterate, it is a system problem. Like you just said, it's not a character flaw. I think people get in this and they're like, oh, I'm not good at tracking this. I'm not good at this. I'm not good at that. And it's like a lot of people aren't great at it, but if they have a good system in place, then it solves everything. So again, I think you can get really in your head, and imposter syndrome can creep in this phase. And I just want to remind people, it's not them. It's just the systems that they have. So that's my pep talk.
I think that's a very big blanket, good blanket statement, that it's almost never a character flaw with these kinds of things. It's really about having the pieces, the processes, and the systems in place to manage things, and to make sure that you're working efficiently and not doing things that don't need to be done. Um, a lot of the outsourcing, automating, all these things together can help you to build a business that you can actually manage and still have a life to live. But part of the problem, Carly, is that when we don't start with that kind of set of criteria that come down to viewing it through the lens of how is this going to impact my life, decisions are made without that consideration. So you might look and say, well, gee, I can get this system, but it's going to be $250 a month. That's a lot of money. And I'm trying to, I don't really want to give that money up. But then if you look and say, well, wait a minute, first and foremost, I want to be able to be home for dinner. And if I have this system in place, I'm going to be able to, shave 8 hours a week off my time, which is going to help me stop missing dinner. Now that 250 investment is being seen in a different lens than if you're just looking at it saying, oh, it's $250. That's going to, And I don't really think that's a something I want to spend right now, you know? So when you start having this lens of what your life is supposed to look like, you can really allocate your efforts and resources differently toward that end, right?
Yes.
Surprisingly, when you define that as the bottom line, then the decisions enforce that bottom line, not the necessarily the bottom line on your income statement.
Well, what's interesting though is that that can also change whatever that is over time. And like you were saying, you had a great life first business, and then you're like, oh, but I needed something more. And that's another third cause.
Don't do that.
I'm doing that. Or I'm going to throw that back at you and use that as an example over and over again, just to remind you. Um, but that leads us back to the third cause of the ownership trap, which is you don't have a plan to evolve. So what can you speak to on that note?
Well, that things will change, and you know if the world doesn't change, then you're going to change. And I've talked to so many solopreneurs that say, I've got this great business, I've been doing it for 5 years, and I'm just done. I just don't really want to do this anymore. I want something new, and I'm pivoting over to this or to that. And the idea of doing that is great, and it may be not that you're tired of it, but that the world's changed. I mean, I think a lot of solopreneurs have been impacted by AI and how it's changed either the demand for what they do or how they should do what they do. But this process of conscious evolution is critical to any business, and especially a solopreneur business, because it's very easy to keep doing what you're doing when you're the only person kind of in charge.
Yeah.
If you've got a company full of people, somebody's going to be saying, "Hey, this is something, something's going on, raising the alarm or whatever." But when you're on your own, you're the only one that's going to raise the alarm, and you have to think through how you're going to modify your business, whether it's a tweak or a major pivot, in order to address either changes in yourself and your needs and the life you want, or changes in the world around you, or some combination of those.
Exactly. So you guys, I guess what we're trying to say is if your first business as a solopreneur feels like a job, it's not because you are failing, it's because you are stuck in a system like we're talking about that is broken, and you likely have one of these three problems going on and you've fallen into the ownership trap. So just think about that. Joe, you look like you're going to say something. I don't want to cut you off.
Oh, just that we're not going to leave you hanging forever. We'll be providing solutions.
Exactly. This is your little carrot episode. And you guys, well, and thank you so much for tuning into this carrot episode. We're really excited about the way that all of this is going and the direction we're taking from here on out on the show, as well as with our company, Lifestar. So if you want to keep following us with this new journey, this new content for all of you, then be sure to subscribe to the Aspiring Solopreneur on your favorite platform. Share this episode with a friend. And I mean, if you think this is the best episode you've ever heard in your entire life, leave us that 5-star review. We'd so appreciate it, and it helps us spread the word. So we'll see you next week or next time on the Aspiring Solopreneur.